Life leads us through travels many a time, be it holidays or moving for work. Travels range from long-lasting to as short as a trip to your neighboring town to visit a friend. Invitation to Wine is a travel bidding of one such old friend towards another to handle a request that he can't leave to anyone else. There are many big political motions behind the events in Shangshu, but it's neither the revelations about Yan nor of Sui that stand in the foreground. At least not for now. They are merely the catalyst for the complex relationships that would blow up the matter of a simple cup into a complicated mess of lies and deceptions. After one sifts through the many roundabout statements, a web of characters shine through that are all motivated by their rather straightforward goals and ideals. Li and Liang are in the center of happenings, and their friendship is a testimony to their characters that are fueled by kindness and ambitions. As it is tradition though, every Chinese New Year brings forth another Sui sibling, and before diving into the complex picture behind Shangshu and its magistrate, we are gonna take a short look at the one that is reason for all of this commotion. For being such an important storyline, through the ages limits Ling to an almost minor side character in her own debut event, which suits her character quite well to be fair. As the oldest of all of the sisters, Ling has spent a considerable amount of time in the mortal realm. Time that she mainly passed by taking in the sights around her and composing them into poetry. One word that she used most often during this is wind. Warm wind, fragrant wind, or easterly wind are all wordings that she expressed her thoughts about her surroundings with. Ling thought she knew it all. Every place she visited gave her not a new thought. All of them could be described by the wind. She grew ever the more bored about Yan. Her travels haven't yielded any new sights in decades after all. It was at this point that Chongyu sent her towards a new scenery, one where vernal winds would never blow. There, her inspirations and admirations returned after witnessing a whole new phase of the Yanese landscape and people. Before coming to human, Ling has always been a rather reclusive person who doesn't involve herself with any worldly affairs. For once, this also hasn't changed all too much. After her stay at the northern border, she would stay out of the public eyes for the vast amount of time, valuing her freedom. Her uninvolvement in most affairs doesn't necessarily stem from her being unbothered by them, but rather by her nature of being unshackled. The aspect that human changed though is her willingness to act. The catastrophe hitting Shangshu 30 years ago had such a small destructive effect because Ling protected the city. All it cost Shangshu was one of its 18 peaks, the perfect spot to stay reclusive for a while. And here is where Nyan would persuade Ling in joining her endeavor of freeing them from Sui. Or more accurately, Ling decided to join on her own. During their fight with Sui's reflection, Ling asked Nyan why it is that she wants to stop Sui. She answers that she doesn't want to disappear. Struggle against it is all she can do, even though a concrete plan is not in her hands right now. Not even to how they are supposed to get out of this immediate problem. The reflection of Sui is one born and strengthened by their worries and doubts in themselves, as well as the future. Both Nyan and Dusk have plenty of those. A shut-in that hides from reality, and a smith that doesn't even know herself why she fears her own disappearance so much. Wang would summarize this well. They have become too much like mortals themselves. Feelings like these are not something they should be bothered by. Wang frowns at these emotional changes of his sisters, that he even sees partially in Ling. Ling, meanwhile, is disappointed by Nyan and Dusk not being able to answer her why exactly they seeked her, as they are apparently not aware of their own underlying feelings. As such, she tries to explain them that they have become their very own entity, with experiences and emotions over the time that they spent in Yan. In her words, "To live upon this land is quite fine, is it not?" Seeing that her sisters will likely take more time to realize this themselves though, Ling tells herself that their actions so far suffice for her involvement. They are her little sisters after all. And so, having received a satisfactory answer mostly by herself, Ling simply beats the reflection of Zoe, something she could have done from the very beginning, but didn't do it since she was waiting for either Nyan or Dusk to do so if they would have found the answer that Ling was giving herself. To live upon this land is quite fine, is it not? Whatever, it may do. To me, nothing else summarizes Ling as well as those words of hers. An unfettered poet that doesn't need much to decide her next goal. It's almost like she's playing a game with herself of finding a good enough excuse to actually get involved with the current soul crisis. She is the first sibling that feels like she is a godlike being in this way. Yes, Nyan and Dusk may have their powers, but for a lack of better wording, appear human in character. Ling still is mostly her reclusive and especially distant self that stays uninvolved with mortals most of the time. Nyan actively seeks out their stories, and Dusk even painted an entire world inhabited by people. And here is where Wang's statement becomes important again. The two younger sisters already became much more like mortals than they were in the beginning, and Ling has also changed in small ways after her stay in human. Wang is worried about the consequences that brings to his sisters. But Ling? Well, as she says, living in Yan is quite fine. To her, this realm is neither detrimental to them, nor limits it their enjoyment. And I'd argue that this is also what Ling is concerned about most. If her freedom is in danger, why not take up action? And if it is to help her sisters, well, then that's all the better. Weirdly, Lee is somewhat of a model adult. He's neither fretting too much about things, but he's equally not just living day by day. His leisure attitude of taking things as they come, and the fact that he always has some way of turning things towards his favor, making him extrude an air of reliability. Even then, Lee is not actively aiming at being the most reliable. Most often does he act in the background and metaphorically lifts a finger if things demand so. For his own life, this meant moving from place to place quite a lot, especially after he became estranged with his family. Just like Ling, he valued his freedom, never staying at one scenery too long. Initially, this was also his plan after arriving in Langmen, where he quickly got a foothold by forging connections with both Wei Yanwu and the Red King. Little did he know that he would soon house 3 youngsters that made it to him under special circumstances. The important thing about Lee here is that his leisure attitude doesn't mean he's disconnected from the people around him empathetically. He took Hang, Waifu and Ark in without much thought, and sooner than later, 10 years passed since he first arrived in Langmen. Now, with the addition of a little agency that solves small and big problems with his wits and connections. And exactly one of these connections led him to personally travel to Shangshu. Liang Xun and Li have a long history of being good friends. How good exactly? Well, even after not seeing each other for over 10 years, Liang still decided to entrust Li with retrieving the soul goblet and delivering it to him. Either because of how much he trusts Li's capabilities, or because of their relationship. Much more likely it's both. Either way, it's remarkable that this trust lasted over such a long time, meaning that their friendship is surely not an average one. This gets obvious on multiple occasions over the event. First of all, it is important to understand how Li usually works. While he does have rather good fighting capabilities, his preferred weapon is information. He sizes up opposing parties and leverages both his connections and intel of any given situation to steer it into his favor. It's usually not a fun time being on his receiving end. A polite and unassuming man is a mask that Li can drop in a matter of seconds when he presents you evidence of your recent tax evasion. Du is the one that gets to know this firsthand as she seeks the help of Li, during which he pretty much read her entire plan and reasoning for opposing her father. With most other people, Li upholds this unassuming attitude and puzzles himself through the web of parties that are active in Shangshu. Save for Liang. Not only did Li heed his request with only so much as a couple of lines of what to do, he even continued to do so once they met. I would argue that at any point in Shangshu, Li would have abandoned his job if it would have been any other client, or more accurate, he would have never went this far to begin with. His presence here alone is proof enough of how highly he values his relationship with Liang. During his stay, he even goes further. As established, information is his weapon. One would expect from him to find out anything he can about the goblet from Liang, but he never does so until the end. He knows fully well that whatever he has been carrying is important to Liang, and while he does ask for details about it, he never backs down after Liang says that he will tell him all he needs to know. He knows that his friend has his reasons. This also has the neat side effect of all the underlying politics and connections staying hidden with an understandable explanation, but more on that in a bit. Aside from their one talk when things got serious, Li's tone towards Liang is also notable. His usually polite and witty wording yields to a familiar style with more than a couple personal banters. Liang even smiles at this bad mouth of Li that hasn't changed over the years. He knows his boundaries fully well, in terms of where he can joke around and wants to. Anything related to the goblet gets relegated to business talk, while personal matters are of more interest. As things got heated later on, Li was long aware that the goblet is more than unordinary. Upon hearing from Liang that the stakes are as high as heaven, Li sighs at what he already surmised. Liang's only reason for not telling him earlier was him trying to keep Li out of the matter as much as possible. The only real reason Li has for going on is him knowing that Liang would likely go under if things went badly. So he values his friendship with Liang enough to treat him very differently than others and involve himself in a risky endeavor. How does that look like from the other side? To explore this, we have to take a closer look at what actually happened behind the scenes of Shangshu. Liang Xun is the current magistrate of Shangshu. He is known as a quiet person whose composure is always upright. Meeting Liang means meeting a picture-perfect government official with an overly polite mannerism. This, combined with his policies that improve the life of his citizens, provided him an exceedingly good public image and respect. Liang almost seems too kind at times to be a magistrate, but beneath a calm and collected surface, an ambitious man is planning his next moves. His ultimate goal is an honorable though: the prosperity and peace of the people. This was what led him to go into politics in the first place, which saw him all the way to be head of his home city. The recent events around the Sui siblings placed him into a predicament though. Ling being within Shangshu means that the city itself is a target for the political disparities of Yan, and given Yan's recent movements, these disparities flamed up again and threaten a larger conflict between political parties. Here's the short form of this conflict. There reside three main politically influential parties in Yan that are partially deciding on how to deal with Sui. The Ministry of Rights, responsible for ceremonies as well as Ferranmuts, largely wants to use the Sui proxies to Yan's advantage, whereas the Sui regulators want to rid Yan of the danger of Sui once and for all. The regulators were once a subdivision of the ministry that split from them after a certain incident involving Sui, during which they showed great activity. Their newly given authority has become a thorn in the eyes of the ministry, and so the two parties have developed a rather bad relationship that hasn't been fixed so far. The third involved party is the Tianchi Bureau, not so much as to them having much to do with the Ferranmuts themselves, but because they hold a special place within Yan. Tianchis are basically their highly educated and specialized personnel in a variety of fields that are all under the jurisdiction of the Bureau. Their current head, Bai Dingshan, has been the only real bridge between the Sui regulators and the Ministry of Rights, and so far has mediated between the two sides. This political position has made him a prime target for both sides to sway him in their favor to push their goals on the Sui matter. And here is where Liang is coming into the picture. The Sui regulators wanted to bring the goblet to Shangshu and Ling, planning to force circumstances that would make Tianqi Bai make a choice in their favor. Since such an action would overstep their rights, Liang, as the current head of the city, was tasked by them to retrieve the goblet and feign a theft of it to hand it over to the regulators in secret. I would actually argue that they could have just taken the goblet themselves, just like Li did, which nobody noticed at first, but I also don't know what exactly they had planned with it in the end, or who else might have had their eyes on it. What's more important is that Liang could have likely said no to this request, knowing which political implications this underhand operation had. But either way, Shangshu would have become a stage for a political conflict, and it is better to have a hand in matters than not here. Thus, he ascertained the regulators his support, while in truth he intended to find Ling himself. Since he couldn't do that literally on his own, he needed a wildcard that would be able to move freely, a dangerous and difficult task that could only be taken by someone Liang truly trusts. No better person fitted that position than Li. Liang knew that only his old friend would have the skill and cunning to keep the goblet safe and locate Ling. He also knew that Li wouldn't press him too much for information if he was not willing to give them. Reason being that he wanted to keep Li out of this as much as possible. And here is where Liang behaves differently towards Li than towards anyone else. He only ever truly burdens Li. He sent very short instructions, didn't relay any details, and even kept hiding the underlying circumstances of his task. Anyone else is getting treated more, let's say, respectfully. At least officially, Li has also never received a notable payment for his troubles. But he never scrutinized Liang for any of that. A friend in need is all the reason he needs to act. I really like how little emphasis is placed on telling how much they are friends, but rather showing that by many details that make it more than obvious. Obvious enough that other characters like Shen notice their relation fast. But this is not the only one that was blatantly out in the open. Liang and Ning's relationship is simple. Officially, Ning is here to oversee Ling under the orders of the Ministry of Rights. Over the 3 years since her arrival, she and Liang have developed feelings for each other, but never got anywhere during this. After all, Liang has never been a ladies' man, and Li is even surprised that he got as far as this already. What else he mentions is that there is a certain similarity between Liang and Wei Yanwu. That being that both of them are at the mercy of their sweethearts. In the case of Ning, that couldn't be more accurate. Liang is constantly flustered around her and makes an effort to hide his undertakings around the goblet from her. Both to not slip information to the ministry, but also to not involve Ning into this. He is concerned for her health after all. Little did he know that from the very start she knew all along about him making an effort to protect the city. Who would call a friend all the way from Langmen over a trivial matter anyway? It's honestly kind of cute to see how much Liang tries to keep things away from her, while she never hides herself that she already does know. For example, when Liang asked her what she was doing during the theft of the goblet by Black Knight, without even mentioning that, she knew that he wanted an alibi from her and so provided one outright. And even then, does she make an effort to lighten his burden, although she is disappointed in not being relied on more. The theft of the goblet by Black Knight was a move she did plan, not to help her ministry, but Liang. The reason being that implications of betraying one of the high institutions of Yan are grave, and Liang was knowingly accepting that. Ning's involvement would have prevented that, but things anyways went unexpected, but her intentions were pure nonetheless. Something that would be rewarded in 2 ways at the end. Liang finally came around to confessing to her, in a typically roundabout way, during which he takes a long drink from his empty teacup out of nervousness. Additionally, would the aftermath of Shangshu treat them both very favorably? To understand what the clusterfuck of happenings and circumstances around Ling is difficult enough. Being able to control it, even more so. The Grand Tutor of Yan is one of 3 High Ministers that are directly beneath the Emperor. This makes him one of the only people that are able to order everyone involved in these events to come together under his guidance. The entire aftermath is decided solely by him. The Sui regulator would be admonished for their transgressions, the siblings would receive concrete orders, and both Liang and Ning would be recognized for their actions. In Liang's case, the Grand Tutor notes the decision to involve Li as an irrational move, one that turned out quite favorably though, allowing Liang to break past the settled positions. The tutor sees great potential in Liang and his admirable intent to give everything for the people. He would now follow him to the capital. Liang is initially confused and even unsure whether he wants to do so. Shangshu is his hometown after all. Here, Ning shows again why she is a great character, worried about Liang's well-being. She knows that he would forever regret it if he wouldn't take the chance to help more people within Yan, even though that would mean leaving home and being separated from her. She too hesitates at first at saying anything at all to the tutor's command towards Liang. After all, she also would not want to be away from him. But she values Liang's own feelings towards the people more highly and thus congratulates him on his promotion, spurring him to accept it, which she would later thank Ning for. In return, the Grand Tutor also arranges for her to be relocated to Human, where he would meet her again with Liang, making their separation only a temporary one. Invitation to Wine is, even for Arknight standards, keeping many things within its subtext. Subtext that is hard to decipher, and it probably is one of the events that suffers the most from translation. Regardless of interpretation, it shows the underlying political struggles within an otherwise peaceful nation that is largely being held together by powerful individuals that do in the end mostly have the interest of the people in mind. Something that would turn out to be far more complicated and deep than what this event implied. At the center of Shangshu itself though, personal relationships are what guide the happenings and prevent a further escalation. While the characters constantly remind each other that these are merely trivial matters, they are hardly ordinary. Liang is more than honorable in his intentions, but it is two close people that help him realize these. Neither of these is doing this because they feel obligated or benefit from it, but because it is in favor of one they hold dear. Li has a certain ideal that he follows in business, which can also be applied to his friendship with Liang. Speak only of right and wrong, not of gain and loss. If a friend needs help, then there's only one right thing to do. And even if one would speak of gain and loss, then a friend's well-being is more than enough payment for a little bit of time and trouble.